Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back. Today's podcast is titled Stuck on the Fence. When will your buyers finally make their big leap? In other words, when are your buyers going to stop being lookers and actually become buyers?
Are you finding it challenging to determine which of your buyer leads will actually buy? Will they buy with you? Will they sign with you? Everything about the buyer side has gotten a little bit more challenging, hasn't it?
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you guys essentially a litmus test, a list of questions and thoughts, not really pre-qualifying necessarily, but we're going to be examining more the behaviors of buyers that are just lookers versus buyers that are actually buyers. And I'll tell you the real bottom line, how to know whether you're working with a buyer or a looker is if they actually buy. But there are some certain behaviors that lead up to that, actual outcome that we're going to walk you guys through today. We're going to try to keep this light and fun to make you laugh because frankly, many of you have learned these lessons the hard way. And so for those of you who have learned these lessons the hard way, let's make it so you don't have to relearn them. And if you're learning for the first time, don't make any of these mistakes and do listen to what we're sharing with you on today's podcast. And remember, if you want the notes for today's podcast, as always, go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. It is our daily free newsletter that's just for the podcast listeners. So go to harrisrealestatedaily.com, drop your email address in, then you have to hop over to your email itself, confirm that you want the subscription to the newsletter, and then after you do that, you'll start getting that day's notes as well as that day's podcast sent directly to you. That is our insider list. So simply go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. Do that now. That should be your homework. You should already be in the newsletter. You should already be getting our exclusive content. Julie, let's roll in.
All right, so first some facts. In most markets, not all, but in most, there are still more buyers in today's market than there are listings to sell them. Now, even when your buyers are motivated and qualified, you still don't necessarily have a guarantee that you'll find them the right house or win a potential bidding war. In addition, you do have to worry about how you'll get paid now for your hard work and whether your buyer prospects will sign your buyer representation agreement.
Now, obviously, what we're going to be leaning into is we're wanting all of you to seriously get on the list absolutely now for the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation. The Ethical Real Estate Professional designation is something that we're going to be rolling out within the next, hopefully, a couple of weeks. Our team is still finishing up with some of the details. And to get on the invite list to one of the founding members of the new Ethical Real Estate Professional designation, which our initial designation is going to focus on exclusive buyer agency, you have to text the word buyer to 47372. As of this morning, 551 of you already have, so you are on the interest list. If you are not on that list already, if you're interested in being on the list, text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. When the webinar is ready to go, we'll send you out a text inviting you to register for the webinar, and then you can be one of the founding members of the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation. If you want to see the actual website, that went live last week at ethicalrealestateprofessional.com. But the most important thing for you to do is take the information we're giving you on today's podcast and realize that the world really has changed with regards to working with buyers, and the Ethical Real Estate Professional Exclusive Buyer Agency designation is going to make it so that you guys are ultra competitive despite all these changes to the rules. So text the word buyer to 47372.
So as Tim just demonstrated for you, pre-qualification and having an actual buyer presentation matter more now than ever. Why? Well, ask yourself this. How do you determine which of your buyers will actually turn into a closed transaction? How do you set appointments to use your pre-qualification script and deliver your buyer presentation? If all this seems weird to you, you're like most agents who have yet to do any of this formally. The buyer pre-qualification script is simply a conversational outline. It uses questions to learn about your buyer's time frame, their motivation, and their needs. After using that script, those questions, you'll meet your buyer prospects and use your buyer presentation to solidify your relationship, how you work, and how commissions work now that you have to explain that. Ultimately, that will result in their signature being on your buyer agency contract. So today we're showing you a few questions, not all of them, because you get all of that in the ethical real estate professional designation. We're going to show you some of the questions from the buyer prequal script. To access all of that, join Premier Coaching, get on the ethical real estate professional list as Tim instructed you.
All right, Julie, we have to take a side step before you get to these points, and these are so awesome. I'm so excited to share these with these guys. But these are some questions that Julie pulled out of our buyer pre-qualification script, which all of you should be using before meeting with any buyer. But I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. Even though our script that we're going to share parts of it with you today are state of the art and you're going to love these questions and the answers and what they actually mean to you in your real estate business, the bad news that I am going to start with is that there is no such thing as a have to buy buyer. What do I mean by that? There has never been and never will be a buyer that absolutely has to buy a house. Never has been, never will be a buyer that absolutely has to buy a house. Some of you would argue, and I would say you're mostly right, is that you have somebody that's doing a 1031 and they want to not have to pay the taxes, but they could still pay the taxes and not buy something. Sure. Every single buyer on planet Earth is buying because they want to, not because they have to. Be clear about that. Don't be delusional about that. Now, on the other side of the transaction are listings. There are many, 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 many examples of sellers that absolutely positively have to sell their home. In other words, the option of not selling the home is egregious versus the option of selling the home. The option of not selling the home is painful, if not impossible, and they have to sell the house. You guys get the difference?
Also, sellers don't have to qualify. Buyers have to qualify. Buyers could be highly motivated, but not qualified at all. Right. Sellers don't have to qualify to sell their home.
Exactly. You could have a seller that basically, you could have a probate listing, has to sell the house. You could have a seller that's in distress, has to sell the house. Relocation, owns 2 homes at once. Can't, all these things. There are lots and lots of examples of sellers that have to sell. So when you were going through this, and we're going to do, we're going to share with you the ways to kind of pick through all the prospective buyers. But do know that at the end of the day, long-term success comes from being a listing agent. And if you want to last in real estate, you have to learn how to be a listing agent and stay a listing agent. But there are ways, obviously there's, every one listing needs at least one buyer. And so what we want you to do is make sure you're picking through all the buyers that show up in your life, and you're only working with the ones that are going to be the ones that actually transact. In other words, they're all always going to be want to buy buyers, but there's going to be some that obviously are going to be more motivated than others. What you guys do is you make the mistake of working with the ones that you're treating them all the same. You're not looking for the best ones. You're looking for anybody that says, I'm a buyer, and that's the person you're spending your energy with. You're not kicking the lesser motivated ones to the curb and working with only the ones that are truly going to transact.
And the only way to sift and sort your buyers, the topic of this podcast, who's going to buy with you, is to ask important questions. Like number 1, I assume because you're calling or emailing or texting, but mostly I assume because you're calling me directly, you're not already working with an agent. Now, this question happens early in the script so that you can skip the rest of the script if they're already committed to another agent.
It's not the first question. That's like question number 5.
But it's early.
It's early. We're just giving you a sprinkling of some of the questions, but I'm going to say that again. So, Mr. Buyer, I assume because you're calling me directly that you're not working with another agent. Now, what will other agents do? They will never ask the question in the first place, most of them, or they'll say, are you working with a realtor? Now, any experienced buyer is going to know that when they get the question, are you working with a realtor? They don't know what the hell working with means. They don't know what it means, or they do know what it means, but they're going to tell you yes because they just want the question that they called you in the first place or communicating with you in the first place answered so that they can get back to their lives. So, Mr. Buyer, I assume because you're calling me directly that you're not working with another agent. And let them answer the question, and you're going to get the truth. Well, I've talked to Bob a few times. Well, but you aren't working with him as an exclusive buyer's agent, right? Oh, no, I haven't made the commitment. Okay, good. That's a buyer you can proceed with, provided how they respond to the other questions. Question 2.
What price? Go ahead.
Well, Julie's bouncing around these questions. So again, don't write these down thinking this is the order in which you ask the questions. Right. It's absolutely not, but this is another great question. Question number 2, Julie.
What price has your lender told you not to go above? This question covers all of the bases with regard to finding out about their financing. When you ask this question, they'll tell you if they're all cash. They'll tell you that they still need to get a lender. They'll tell you if they're pre-approved and what price not to go over. Instead of asking all of those tedious individual questions, the script, what price has your lender told you not to go above, gets straight to the answer. I think of that as the all-encompassing financing question.
And again, you're going to find out that you're going to I was online to Rocket Mortgage and I did some online form and it pre-approved me. Those pre-approvals and pre-qualifications, all those terms don't actually have any sort of consequence. They don't mean anything because they mean different things depending on what lender you're working with. So like, for example, I'd love to tell them about our, what's the addendum?
Oh, the ultimate addendum.
The ultimate addendum, Premier Coaching clients, make sure you're using this. So what the ultimate addendum does, and this is designed originally for listing agents, but you could certainly use on the buyer side as well. What the ultimate addendum does is, I'll give you an example how Julie and I came up with this originally. How about that? Mm-hmm. So Julie and I were happily selling real estate, and we had a lot of listings, and we get an offer on a listing that we didn't accept the offer because the buyer appeared with this very, well-known agent, and she wrote this offer saying the buyer's, approved and all these things, sent over the lender's letter, everything. The thing that the lender's letter was just textbook perfect, and we didn't counter it. We just accepted it. We based on the acceptance on her reputation and on the fact that, this lender's letter looked good. All right, we get close to closing, and it turns out the lender did not decide to give that buyer a mortgage. Why? Because even though the actual financing, this is the little trick that she did, the actual financing was contingent on the sale of the home. The purchase, the financing, that the lender letter she provided for us didn't mention the fact that the financing itself was contingent on the sale of the home. Julie, can you drill down on that?
Yeah. So, if you write that it's contingent on financing, but there's no detail to that, there could be a hidden home sale. And if I recall correctly, because I know which deal you're talking about, it was a very stressful one and a very painful lesson.
Well, it's because it was a Domino's deal. We had 3 deals behind that one.
It was 5, actually.
5.
It started with, back when there were home sale contingencies, 5 deep, started with a first-time buyer deal, and it ended with one of our high-end listings. It was actually contingent on an $800,000 lot selling. It wasn't even a home sale. But because it was all wrapped up into contingent on financing, who would have known the difference?
Well, so contingent on financing is something that everyone's just going to naturally accept. Bob and Sally are approved to purchase this house up to $750,000. It's contingent on, blah, 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 contingent on financing. And Julie and I were dumb, and we didn't think, well, what the hell is the financing contingent on? And so from that mistake, we then decided to make the ultimate addendum. And the ultimate addendum, I don't know if you remember this, but we actually got the original framework for the ultimate addendum from her.
Yes.
When we wrote on one of her listings.
Absolutely.
And she countered back to us with this long litany of things.
Good language.
She wasn't going to accept the lender's letter unless the lender validated that they had checked all the things.
Well, okay, so we're kind of flying at 30,000 feet for some of these
guys,
but
right? Look, Julie, this isn't
it's
the topic.
Important, though.
This isn't the topic of today's podcast. But if you're in Premier Coaching, make sure you're using the ultimate addendum, because ultimately what it's going to do is listing agents, when you can receive a perfect textbook offer on a listing, and it's contingent on financing. You need to send that lender. You need to send our ultimate addendum back. We accept your offer. Everything looks great. But we want more information on this contingent on financing thing. Don't just take any letter that comes from any loan officer unless you use our ultimate addendum that makes the loan officer do a 3-merge credit report, makes them do the verifications, makes them do all the things. And then you're going to discover it turns out there's a pig farm in Botswana that the whole financing deal is contingent on.
Which isn't listed yet.
Which isn't listed yet.
It forces them into underwriting.
Right.
Essentially. So, and we could talk on and on. We have done podcasts about that, but it's
if
certainly in Premier Coaching.
Premier Coaching students, make sure you're using that. If you're not in Premier Coaching, great news. You can join Premier Coaching for free. Click the link below or just go to premiercoaching.com.
All right. Question number 3. Again, in no particular order, we're giving you a sampling of what you get with Ethical Real Estate Professional as well as Premier Coaching. Which home in the neighborhood do you plan on selling? Remember, this is a buyer lead, right? But we're going to ask, which home in the neighborhood do you plan on selling? This helps you determine if they're also a listing lead. Note, many agents never ask that question when they get buyer leads. Don't make this mistake. Many buyer leads are listing leads in disguise. In fact, I know some of you listening because you feel like you can't work with any more buyers that are already in your pipeline. You don't even call back those sign calls or those open house leads. What if you knew those were also listing leads?
Well, that's the premise. It doesn't even matter what the price point is that you're working in. If you got some first time, the only person that's ever going to buy this is an investor or a first time buyer. But if you don't call all of them back and you don't use our pre-qual script and you don't ask all the questions, you're not going to discover, again, that turns out that person buying that first time home buyer house actually was an investor, and they do transactions on a regular basis, or there's somebody that is buying their first time home for them to live in, and they don't have a house for sale, but their mom does, that she wants to sell, or their boss does, that he wants to sell.
But you don't know if you don't ask that question.
You don't know if you don't actually pre-qualify everyone. You got to call every single every single lead back. A lot of you delegate the most important thing after lead generation is the pre-qualification. A lot of you delegate that or don't even do it at a high level. You're losing so many deals. So many of you got this advanced calculus that you have to generate so many leads per year to generate so many closings per year. And well, it's because your numbers are so out of whack. You have to generate so many leads because your process between the generation of the lead and the pre-qualification of the lead is clouded with too many funnels, too many, well-intended but low-skilled people that you've delegated that process to. You got to get in the habit of actually pre-qualifying the leads yourself, because you need to become really, really freaking good at it so that when you do decide to hand that off, if you ever do, and most of our most successful agents don't, especially when they're focusing on listings, you'll then know how to coach and train someone to actually do it at a high level. Most people never learn to pre-qualify, especially coming out of, really the markets that we've been in.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, point number 4, or question number 4, paint me a picture. Ideally, what are you looking for in your next home? This is a simple question. The more you can drill down on the prospect's needs, the faster you can find what they want. This is especially critical because you may have to proactively find off-market homes for the prospect if what they desire isn't in the MLS. All of my coaching clients keep a wants list for all of these wayward buyers that haven't been able to find inventory. And most of them, like if you call and you ask Kristen Hawley or Lance Kenmore or Gina in Pennsylvania, I've got a buyer who wants X, Y, and Z. They probably have a house in the back of their mind which may or may not be in the MLS. It could be in their own database. It could be a for sale by owner. It could be new construction.
Okay, advanced coaching. Here you go. If they're moving from, let me edit what I was about to say. Have them take a picture and send to you if they're relo or if they're local. Go and look to see what they're actually living in. And chances are, especially if they're, done multiple transactions, they're going to want to buy a larger version of what they already have. And I'm going to tell you the obvious reason why. It's because most people don't want to or can't afford to buy new furniture. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. So if you have a relocating, buyer, don't start asking them if they want a contemporary or a modern or a colonial or a Georgian of your house or a federal or all these other things. Like some people coach and train you guys to do. Fortunately now you can get their address and go online and look at yourself, look at whatever they're living in now. But chances are they're going to want to buy the exact same version of what they have, just slightly bigger in a very similar neighborhood. So just keep all these things in mind. Don't overly complicate it, but do have get a starting point of getting an idea of what they're looking for. If they start out with, I don't know what the hell I'm looking for, that's probably an indication that that's not a very motivated buyer.
However, in the Ethical Real Estate Professional Kit, they get it's basically a form that handles this question. It starts with this question, what are you looking for? And it has a fill in the blank. So you can have, maybe you've got a husband and wife or, partners that are looking. You give a form to him, you give a form to her, and you say, what's a deal killer? Write 3 things. I absolutely don't want to live near a freeway. I don't want to back up to a railroad track. I hate this part of town, whatever. Each of them fills that out. We give that to you as part of your Ethical Real Estate Professional Buyer Kit, where you can use that during your presentation. Then you can compare what do they want, what does the other person want, and how do they align. That way you don't have to go find and show 30 properties. You can whittle it down to the 3 that they're both going to agree on.
I was just thinking as you were saying, I wonder how many buyers have ever said, I want to live near a busy road, near power lines, with a gas line easement in my backyard.
All of those things.
Next to the freeway, right?
Yes,
backing up to the prison.
Yes.
That's what I'm looking for.
With a junkyard in the back, yeah. Okay, number 5. When I find you a home, now this predicates that you got an answer to the previous question.
And again, these are not all the questions from the buyer pre-qual script. These are just the ones that Julie pulled out. So if you want the entire buyer pre-qualification script, text the word buyer, B-U-I-E-R, to 47372. And when we have the launch event that's coming up in a number of weeks, the webinar, we'll text you an invite to attend. And this buyer pre-qualification is part of Ethical Real Estate Professional Exclusive Buyer Agent Designation. Remember, text the word buyer to 47372.
Along with a whole bunch of other buyer scripts.
Yep.
Okay, number 5, when I find you a home that has A, B, and C, and D, their stated needs and price range from the previous question. The home you're looking for that checks all those boxes on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate your desire to write up an offer on it? 10 means you're absolutely 110% ready, and 1 means you're just kicking tires.
So let me do a role play on that one, okay?
Sure.
So Julie, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say I find that perfect house, 5 acres, great place for you to have mini donkeys and roosters and whatever the heck your heart desires.
Sure.
Okay? And it's in the right part of town. It's far enough out, but it's not so far that you have to worry about, huge drive times. The house needs some work, doesn't need a lot of work. It's the little cute country cottage you've been telling me you want. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely 100%, you buy that house immediately. Where would you rate your motivation to buy that house?
I'm probably a 7.
A 7. Okay, 7. Great. Congratulations. So this is the important part, dear listener. Listen to what I'm about to say. 7. Congratulations, Julie. That's fantastic. So can you tell me what it would take to get you to a 10 and then shut up? What would it take to get you to a 10 and then listen? Because then you're going to discover that they do indeed have the pig farm in Botswana that their uncle has to sell to give them their money for their down payment.
Yeah, I got to sell the pig farm first.
Oh, a pig farm. Congratulations. Ideally, how soon do you think that pig farm will be sold? And then you're going to start discovering that the buyer you thought was a home run hitter actually turns out they don't even know where the baseball field is.
That's right. Now, varieties of their answer, because they're almost always going to be a 7, predictably.
They do most of the time. Well, the good ones are going to say a 10.
Yeah, if they're ready to go.
And remember, you're pre-qualifying somebody before you meet with them. So you weed out the ones that are going to say 1. Okay, scale 1 to 10, 10 being ready to buy it. Where would you rate your motivation? A 3. A 3, congratulations. Well, what has to happen for you to make it to a 3? And then they rattle off, well, we have to find out if we're getting relocated and we're having to fix a whole bunch of things on our credit and blah, 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 blah. Oh, and Johnny has to graduate from high school, which doesn't happen for 17 years.
And I think I have a bankruptcy somewhere.
Exactly, right?
You find out, but we throw all that on to remind you that these answers are really important. But typically, you're going to find that they are not sure they're relocating, or they decided to get divorced and there's no divorce decree yet, or they have something to sell is very common. Sometimes the simple answer to your example, that cute little cottage in the country that you've been telling me you want, is, well, if you can find that for under $700,000, then I would be a 10. It's going to be something maybe you can achieve, but now you know more about what your mission is.
So Julie just said something. So remember, one of the questions is what's the maximum purchase price the lender told you not to go above. Now, if that lender pre-qualified, this is advanced coaching, pay attention. If that lender pre-qualified that buyer for a 6.5% mortgage, 30-year fixed, and that's the reason the max loan amount is $750. Well, you now know, because we've taught you through Ethical Real Estate Professional, how to actually get the mortgage rate lower by getting the seller to contribute some points in closing costs to buy the rate down to the point where they can afford to purchase something that's actually $850 and the payment's the same as if it was $750. You now have essentially made it so you can sell them possibly obviously a more expensive house that might fit their needs even more if there's nothing that fits their needs in that particular price point. Do not assume that Larry the lazy lender is going to know anything about what we've been teaching you, because most lenders have been making their living off refinances and they haven't had to do a lot of work like this. They're all learning the same as you are, but you're going to have to remember this is your client. You're going to have to lead them. You're going to have to make sure that they're, essentially their bases are covered as far as the mortgage goes. Thus the reason we teach you how to do that at a high level in the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation.
Yes, and these are just 5 questions from our buyer prequalification script. The answers you get from your buyer prospects will help you determine who you're going to spend your time with, how you're going to spend your time with them, and who's going to be a prospect in the future, or possibly they're not a lead for you at all. So everything we've talked about in today's podcast, and I think yesterday's too, helps you articulate your value. If you can put all these things together, when you put all these things together, and you take the responsibility of leading your client to the best choices for them, you have provided value, haven't you? This is a lot more advanced than just saying you got to sign this because it's the law now.
And so if you've stuck around the whole call or whole podcast, I'm going to give you a bonus point. And this is one of the first questions that we ask at the top of the script, which Julie didn't give you. And all these questions, by the way, are Julie and I questions. These are all copywritten by us. We don't give our scripts away because this is content that we put value on, because this is exclusive content that we created over the years. One of the first, so I'm going to role play with myself. Ring, ring. Hello. Hi, I'm thinking about, I'm interested in 123 Elm Street. 123 Elm Street, that's a terrific home. Everyone's calling on that property. Oh, by the way, which house in the neighborhood are you thinking about selling? Now, there's different versions of what I just said, but I want you to ask that towards the top. So that's a great property. Everybody's calling about that one. Let me check to make sure that's still for sale and find out what any of the current listing information is. Oh, by the way, which house in the neighborhood are you thinking about selling? We want you to pull out of that seller, out of that buyer immediately if they're actually a seller in disguise. That's one of the top questions you ask because it does change your approach with that conversation. Because what many of you will do is you will not learn the buyer actually is a seller in disguise until, frankly, you've felt like for some reason now it's appropriate for you to have seller conversations. Seller conversations you have to have the seller conversation with that prospective buyer right away because you need to find out if they need to sell their house before they can purchase. Not all of them do. Don't assume that they do. Don't assume that they care if they do. A lot of buyers nowadays will buy without the sale. So we teach you guys this all over the place. Premier ethical real estate professional on this podcast. But use the questions. Use all the pre-qualifying questions. Don't skip any. The questions are written in the order in which they're written to get you to the point where you know what the buyer's motivation is. You know if they have a house to sell. You know what their time frame is. You know if they're working with another agent. You know how long they've been looking. One of the other questions that Julie didn't talk about is how long you've been looking for a home. I've been looking for a home for 90 days. 90 days, that's great. Have you seen any homes that you've liked while you've been looking? Yes, there's a house I saw at 123 Elm Street during an open house 2 weeks ago. Oh, I know that house. That's a terrific property. Did you make an offer on that property? No, I didn't. Well, it sounds like that's maybe a perfect property for you. If that was still available, would you want to make an offer on that one? Well, I probably would. I'm oversimplifying it, but are you understanding what I'm getting at here?
We close deals like that.
You're
totally not really oversimplifying it because we did do that.
So let me find out that property's still for sale and let's write an offer on it. The buyer's going to go, okay. Now the buyer saw it during an open house. Why didn't the buyer make the offer during the open house? I know why. Because the agent holding the open house didn't think to even have a conversation with the buyer, let alone ask the buyer if they wanted to buy the house. Because they weren't using our scripts. You guys following us in all this? This should make you excited because there's so many ways to create revenue from selling real estate if you just know what to say and how to say it. This is not a complicated business.
I think, looking back on this maybe 6 months from now, this era in real estate coaching maybe, I feel like it's going to be the era of the buyer agent awakening.
Hell yeah.
Because for how long, forever, the types of things we're talking about that they're now having to do and come to terms with and get their scripts polished up and have buyer presentations and get a signature on that contract, that wasn't really, it wasn't standard practice until now.
Well, it's because FOMO,
Yeah, that's right.
and FOMO is creating, made essentially low-skilled agents look like superstars.
That's true.
I sold the house. No, the house actually sold itself to the buyer.
You got in the middle.
Now you do have to do some actual things that you could take ownership of on the listing side because frankly, that's the real work. But now guess what? You're going to have to learn the same level of skills, if not some cases more skills to work with buyers than listing agents have been doing forever. That's what Julie's trying to say.
Yes.
And the agents that realize that are the ones that are going to demand premium commissions and are going to own the market. So there's a massive bifurcation. The market's going to be split in two. The agents that are listening and learning from what we're saying. I know this sounds egotistical. It isn't how I intend. They maybe could learn what I'm saying from other sources. You guys get the point. They're not, holding out for the clouds to clear and all of a sudden things are going to be like they were. The ones that are embracing the change, making the most of the change, not, essentially stuck in this whole analysis paralysis consternation phase, and they're saying, all right, damn it, this is what the market has to offer. I'm going to figure out how to be of service to my buyers and sellers, given the new guidelines in the market, and I'm going to win at a higher level than I ever have before. That's what our podcast is for. That's what Ethical Real Estate Professional is for. That's what Julie and I hopefully represent in your lives as your real estate coaches. So thank you for keeping this #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate agents in at least the United States. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.